So I want to tell you just a little bit about this National Visitor Survey. Ultimately, the goal is really to provide some really good baseline information for managers, planners, visitor services specialists, education and outreach folks on visitors to refuges, not only at a national level and thinking big picture about some of these things like climate change, but also at a field station or refuge level as well. So just a quick kind of update on where we are with this. We conducted the survey on about 53 refuges across the country from July 2010 to July 2011. And we contacted almost 15,000 visitors. So this was pretty substantial, and heard back from over 10,000, so we had about a 71% response rate. And I wanted to throw in that we had an online option. I think in keeping with Jess's innovation with iPads and some of the surveying and sampling they've done on refuges, we had about 50% of our respondents that actually chose to do it online. So I think this says a lot about the technologically savviness of visitors. And we're in the process right now of reporting out on individual refuges, and that's going to be part of a USGS data series that at the beginning of the year should be available online. And we're also, after the holidays here, we'll start looking at the data at the national level. So all of that data for 53 refuges rolled up. And that's where we're really going to be able to start looking at some of this larger picture stuff like climate change communication. And the really cool thing is that in 2012, we're actually going to survey on 24 more refuges, starting as early as January. And there's right now 2 refuges that overlap between our study and the Climate Change Partnership study, and that's 10,000 Islands and Kenai Refuge. And then in 2012, we'll also be surveying at the Rocky Mountain Arsenal. So just a quick snapshot of the refuges where we have or are going to sample. The red are the ones that we did in 2010, 2011, and the blue are the ones anticipated for 2012. So there's 4 main categories on this about 10-page survey that we've used. First relates to visitor trip characteristics. So this is everything from the demographics of the individual visitors to their familiarity with the refuge that they're visiting and the system at large, the characteristics of their visit, whether it's where they're from, how far they traveled, who did they travel with, what did they do when they were on the refuge, those kinds of things. And second is visitor expenditures. So what expenditures are they making in the local community as it relates to their visit to the refuge? Third is their specific opinions about the refuge that they're visiting, not only their overall satisfaction, but how important different features and recreation opportunities are, and then how satisfied they are with those, as well as satisfaction with fees that they may have paid. And then lastly, we have these 2 kind of broader system-wide topics that we're exploring, one of which is climate change, and the other is alternative transportation. So in terms of the climate change questioning that we're looking at, and you have to keep in mind that while we're really trying to provide some helpful information in terms of climate change communication on refuges with visitors, this was 3/4 of a page in a 10-page survey, which, you know, as the partnerships project could be a whole survey and then some. So we recognize that it's going to be fairly descriptive in nature, but hopefully still helpful. So the set of questions really was worded this way. There's been a lot of talk about climate change recently. We'd like to know what you think about climate change as it relates to fish, wildlife, and habitats, and that was a specific, something that was really articulated throughout that we're really talking about as it relates to fish, wildlife, and habitat. And to what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statements? And those statements were, you know, unbeknownst to the person taking it, really bundled in 3 ways. One is trying to get a sense of their personal involvements. We had 3 statements related to that. There was a statement related to if they felt their experience would be enhanced by learning more from the individual, from the refuge they were visiting, about how to be more involved, how to mitigate climate change effects. And then we have some belief statements trying to get at what their beliefs were. And we're pulling really from two areas of research. One is Leserwitz et al. Out of Yale and the Six Americas, pulling some of that information, and then also Nisbet's work on message framing. So what we're trying to do ultimately, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, what we're trying to do at a national level, is first try to get at what people's personal involvement is in the issue, and then what some of their beliefs are, so we can think about the messages or the frames that might best resonate with different types of visitors. Because we know from research that there's the factors that do affect how people think about climate change are related to their beliefs and their involvement and their policy preferences and their behaviors. So I wanted to just give you a really quick snapshot. I mean, this is pretty early in the process in some of our data, but just to give you a sense of the kind of information that we're providing to the refuges and that we're thinking about. So I wanted to highlight 10,000 Islands first. Awesome refuge, I've been there. And in just looking at some of the statistics, about half the folks live in the local area, which we defined as less than 50 miles, and about half outside of that area. Most visitors, at least in the last 12 months, are repeat visitors to other refuges as well as to 10,000 Islands. So they've been there before. They mostly come there to observe wildlife, to do saltwater fishing, photography, and some motorized boating. And it's about a 60-40 mix of male-female with an average age of about 59. So a little bit older than, I'd say, the overall average that we're seeing so far. They have a college or technical school completion education and an income of about $75,000 to almost $100,000. And Kenai, which is also an amazing refuge, though I have not been there, is a little different looking as far as their visitors. They have about only 20% living in the local area, with most folks being non-local. And while most of the visitors have been to other refuges before, most have not been to Kenai, at least in the last 12 months. And their top activities are similar: hiking, wildlife observation, photography, and also fishing. About an equal split male-female, with a little bit younger age of 53 average. Similar education level, but a lower income than what we saw at 10,000 Islands. So just to show you the way that we're presenting this information, these two graphs are the personal involvement, and then the last statement's related to asking people if their experience would be enhanced if this refuge provided more information. And so what you see here is that folks are pretty well engaged in terms of being concerned and stating that they're trying to stay informed about this, taking actions to alleviate the effects, and about 40% saying that their experience would be enhanced if the refuge provided more information. So even though the demographics are slightly different between the two, you see some pretty similarities in terms of their personal involvement. And then these next graphs are related to their beliefs. And here you also see some similarities with a little bit higher ratings for those top three for Kenai over 10,000 Islands. The first statement is it's important to consider the economic effects or the economic benefits, which really can be taken as thinking about green economy and the importance of that, and it can also be interpreted as ensuring that there's no negative effects to existing economies by implementing, or adapting to climate change. Future generations will benefit if we address the effects, and then we can improve our quality of life if we address the effects. So those are all rated pretty high, a little bit higher for Kenai than 10,000 Islands. The next two are really, in our development of this, kind of the antithesis of the